Let's start with who I am. I'm Ašipu Rothi. Ašipu is a Sumerian term for the high priest. Roughly translated, the term means demon hunter, and that is exactly what I do. I face the enemies and adversaries that humanity has had for eons, since the fall, arguably, that most people fail to diagnose, fail to recognize, and lack the knowledge and experience required in order to properly deal with them. There are many in the spiritual community that use placebo effect and use, well, theatrics to improve their belief of their followers. I don't do theatrics. I don't do placebo effect. I work in the spiritual planes directly. I've been doing journey work, dream travel, and spirit work since I was a kid. I was adopted into the Ojibwa tribe and taught and educated how to work with spirits and how to do dream travel from a native and shamanic perspective at a very young age. Since that time, I've continued to follow further down the esoteric and occult path. I've been reading mysticism, spirituality, and the occult since I've been able to read. I remember getting books before I was even a teenager on the mudras, on ninjutsu guide to meditation, on shamanism, on meditation, on Eastern and Western theologies. And even though I was born into a traditional Christian family, I always questioned everything. And I knew that most everything we knew, most everything we've been told as truth, had been manipulated at best, distorted. Since we're down that rabbit hole, let's start off with what is my understanding of the truth of religion, the spiritual dogmas that the Western world has been taught are the truth. Well, if you trace back far enough to the Sumerian times, which I have, I've studied and read many Sumerian texts. The Sumerians speak of when the Anunnaki created humans, when who they believe was God created humans, the Christian ethos of God, rather, created humans. They believe that he sat in silence and he listened after he had created the universe, after he had created humanity. I use the term he just not because it's necessarily a masculine energy. I believe God is both masculine and feminine, not androgynous in the sense, but neutral, capable of being both masculine and feminine and choosing their identity. And they typically choose a masculine identity in the aspects of things that require strength because the masculine archetype represents strength more than the feminine does. Whether that's accurate or not my place to say. I think masculine and feminine both have their strengths, they both have their weaknesses, but that's for another day. When God listened after creating the universe, he felt something listening to him. This is discussed in Sumerian texts and in the Sumerian tablets. He knew he was not alone. He knew he was not the first. This creates the concept that God, as the Western world worships it, is in truth the demiurge, is in truth the false God, and created the belief that he was the first and the original, knowing otherwise. My personal thoughts and beliefs are that Any true God, anyone who is truly worthy of the title of God, would not abolish all other forces. They would not need to condemn others for not worshiping him, because the true God doesn't need worship to gain strength. The true God has strength and had strength before they were worshiped. The worshiping of God confirms, as the Gnostics stated in the texts that have been forbidden from the Bible, that God does not require worship. The Sumerians go further into depth and discuss the fact that this is not our first time around. This is not humans or civilization's first time on Earth. In fact, the Sumerians specify there were six before this. The first three were failures. They were failed attempts. They couldn't live long enough. They weren't strong enough. It's like a kid playing with genetic engineering, you know? There's going to be trial and error. The first three were failures. The fourth one had great strength, great knowledge, great wisdom, but they were a threat because they had enough knowledge, wisdom, and coordination to work together and eventually posed a threat to the overlords that had created them. Well, we're on that path. My understanding of the angels are that they are actually not divine beings. The angels are a part of the archons. They're the controllers. They're the control mechanism that was put in place by the demiurge. The fourth civilization, as I mentioned, was great and strong. The fourth and fifth civilization were both very, very powerful and ended up being wiped out because they were too powerful. My personal theory is that the fourth and the fifth civilization are what we know as the tall whites and the Nordics. I believe the civilizations that we call aliens, that are humanoid but not exactly human, are the remaining last vestiges of fifth and sixth, the fourth and fifth generation. The sixth generation is humanity as we know it. And we're actually on the seventh generation for some of us. Some of us have climbed the ladder, so to speak, and have evolved to the next epoch in evolution. There are not many that have, because of the deception, because of the manipulation, because of the ego being so strong in humanity. The message I have about the ego is many spiritual practices speak of dissolving the ego and they speak of letting go of the ego. And the false ego needs to be let go of. The false ego is our desire to overcompensate for our weaknesses. The false ego is our sense of arrogance. The true ego is the sense of identity, it's ourself. And we are individuals, and we need to learn to walk the balance between embracing humanity as a whole and recognizing and embracing our true strengths, our true gifts and abilities, being true to ourselves, and developing that sense of self as our authentic truth. The Grand Canyon is another one down the rabbit hole where we're speaking of creation. The Hopis speak of it, the Sumerians speak of it even. They speak that there is a vault of sorts underground in the Grand Canyon. There are areas of the Grand Canyon that you cannot fly over, you cannot go into, you cannot investigate on Google Maps that are completely blacked out. Those areas, from my understanding, from both the Sumerian and the Hopi perspective, are tunnels to inner Earth. And within these tunnels are ancient beings that have been here since before the Anunnaki, that terraformed underneath the surface before the surface was habitable and still exist there. I know they still exist there because there's a portal near my land as well in Mount Blanca here in Colorado. In December 5 years ago, I was visited by three, well, mantis beings, I will call them. The ant people isn't a correct term, although that's what they're often referred to as. But mantids or mantis beings are closer to accurate because they look like a hybrid of human and praying mantis that is between 8 and 12 feet tall. They have the ability to energetically change their appearance in how they are perceived, not in how they are, but how they are perceived, and the ability to alter their color and their vibration they give off so they can camouflage better, like a chameleon. There were three of them that came to visit me. I had two friends of mine that were here at the same time, so I do have confirmed reference that they actually did physically come here from people that were tangibly here. We were not drinking, we were not doing mushrooms, we were not smoking marijuana, we were stone cold sober. It was on a warm December evening in Colorado here. And my friends remembered seeing them and they remembered waking up in the cabin some 8 hours later. I remember the full experience. I was taken to Inner Earth. I was taken to Agartha. I was taken to Shambhala, which is the capital of Agartha. And I was introduced to what serves as the Watchers Council. I still work with the Mantids. I still work on the Watchers Council. I have random people that are sent to me on a regular basis that need help. Sometimes through virtual methods, through email, through cell phone, through technology, through other shaman friends and whatever. And sometimes they just show up at my door. And that's the life I lead and the life I chose. And I'm very happy to have it. I'm honored and blessed. My needs are very minimal out here. I do live a life of faith, and most of my services are on a donation basis. I'm in the process of rebranding my image and my identity so that I can provide a different service than a lot of other people. The current service which I'm working on is actually working directly on the energetic planes. I have developed the ability to navigate the multiverse and the etheric plane and with my etheric double. And the etheric plane is where your soul essence lives. It is where soul memory is bound to you. It is the plane that is the first existence of individual consciousness. And it's basically what the spiritual community calls 7D. And there's a lot of people that claim to be 5D and 7D and whatever else. And let me take a minute to describe exactly what the requirements are for each level of consciousness. 3D is the tangible world. We all know that. To enter into 4D, we have to have dissolved the ego. We still have a sense of self and a sense of identity up through the eighth dimension, but it has to be from a sense of truth. It has to be from a sense of authenticity and accountability. We cannot project ourselves as something we are not and navigate to the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension then requires freedom from time. It requires detachment. You live in the present moment, in the eternal present moment. The past doesn't exist. The future doesn't exist. The regrets don't exist anymore because regrets are held in the past. Fears are held in the future. So by living in the present moment only, we do not have sadness, we do not have depression, we do not have fear. We break through a lot of our conditioning and programming by living in the present. We still have feelings and emotions, but we don't attach to them. We don't hold on to them. We accept them and them, much the same as doing a higher ritual or something like that. If we do not have the ability to live in the present moment and let go of our fears, let go of our regrets, and things like that, we cannot move up to the fifth dimension. The fifth dimension, as I mentioned, is the astral body. And the astral is different than a lot of people think. A lot of people get confused and think that the astral is the dream world. The astral is is not the dream world. The astral is the creation of the individual higher mind. And every person's interpretation of the astral is different. Every person's experience in the astral is different because of the fact that they are creating in their mind. There are common ideologies and places in the astral that have become a part of the collective consciousness because of the amount of people that have spoken of them. But even then, there is individuality and ideology of personal interpretation, which takes us to the sixth dimension. The sixth dimension requires absolute accountability. You have to hold yourself accountable for your actions, for the situations which you create, knowingly or unknowingly, and do what you can in order to work for the greater good. Understand that good and evil are not absolutes. Sometimes a person is required to do something that society may deem as evil or unjust or malicious or whatever else. But if it is done for the greater good, it is still a benevolent trait. For example, if someone is a mass murderer and you know they're a mass murderer, you have confirmation, you've seen the dead bodies buried in their yard, whatever else. If you know someone is intentionally and knowingly doing mass levels of evil, removing that evil from society is not an act of evil. It is a benevolent task. And that is something that a lot of people do not have the ability to do. A lot of people do not have the ability to recognize what truly needs to be done to live a righteous life. Not from a path of ego, not from a path of self serving, but what is required for the greater humanity to evolve. Recognizing it and doing it are two different things. Living in the present moment only is required before you get to that stage because that eliminates the aspect of fear. That eliminates the aspect of judgment because you're no longer serving the false ego. You no longer care what people think. You do what God commands, whatever you believe God is. My understanding, God is the energy of creation, period. Nothing more. It has been humanized by society and by cultures in order to greater understand something that is beyond their comprehension. And that is what we tend to do. We've created these beautiful images of God, of Jesus, of the angels, of whatever. The ancient apocryphal scriptures speak of what the angels look like. They're not beautiful beings. They're not glowing with halo and vibrant energy. One of them that I remember specifically is what is called a wheel of eyes. And if you could imagine a sphere that is created out of bands, and each of these bands has hundreds of eyes on it. It's literally a sphere that can view everything. It is one of the angels that are described in the Arcanic texts, and one of the many that have been buried because humanity didn't want to let people know that the angels are not beautiful beings. The entire Western religion ethos is based on lies. And this was spoken of 2,000 years ago by the Gnostics. But that's not to say there are not truths in there, and that's not to say it cannot be a good ideology. I'm not here to pass judgment, I'm just here to relay information. Nothing more, nothing less. And I've studied deep down the rabbit hole. I've studied the canonical texts that were removed from the Bible. I've studied the Sumerian texts that predate Christianity by 2,000 years. I've studied every Western theology and philosophy that I can find in my 40 plus years of study. And I've come to a common conclusion, and that is everything we know is distorted or manipulated over time. Everything. The only way to find the truth is to stop looking and start listening. Allow yourself the ability to accept that not everything you see or hear or feel or have been told is based on truth. Allow yourself the ability to think, which brings us to one of the questions that was brought up when I did a search for the top questions of humanity on their spiritual evolution, and that is, do we have free will? And the answer to that is yes, we do have free will, but very few people exercise it. Most people do not have the conviction in their beliefs, ideas, and theologies to go against the masses. So, yes, we have free will, but in order to truly exercise it, we have to have the faith and conviction that is required to move against the mainstream theologies. We have to be able to make a decision for ourselves and convict to it, commit to it. And not a lot of people have that ability. That is not something that comes easy, and it is something that no matter what level you're at will be questioned by yourself and by others, by everyone. It's not, bear with me. I've got random messages from people coming on. So let's just turn the alarms off so we can actually focus on this. Back on page here. The fact is that, I mean, most of the aliens, from my understanding, are, well, a lot of them are evolutions of humanity, previous evolutions that were more evolved, or distant evolutions that came back. Because time is not an absolute construct. There is only now. And the now of every creation is happening in its creation. I have done remote viewing going back to the 40s when the Nazis were exploring Antarctica and going to inner Earth. I've energetically been there. I've physically watched it. I've explored the catacombs of Rome, the vaults of the Vatican, you name it. I mean, time is a construct that was created as part of the system of enslavement. It allows labor to be metered. It allows it to be measured. And in measuring something, it allows it to be a unit of trade as well as a unit of servitude, an aspect of sacrifice. That being said, it is essential in the tangible and spiritual world both that one be mindful of where they spend their time, what they invest their time in, what they invest their energy in, what they focus on. And there are a lot of people that are stuck in a cycle of struggle and trauma because of unhealed issues from the past, because of the imposter self that exists, which they spoke about in ancient Sumerian texts, which is a energetic being, a spirit, entity, deity, alien, whatever you want to call it. It's all the same ideology. They're all non-corporeal beings. It's just a matter of nomenclature to determine which ideology you want to choose. And they're basically, they've got the old cartoon stories and whatever, like the angel and the devil on your shoulder. And this is like the devil on your shoulder. It's the voice in your subconscious that has been guiding you for so long that you recognize it not as a disassociative aspect or something that is outside of you, but something that's been a part of you for so long that you do not recognize it as being foreign. The Sumerian texts, they speak of the process to remove this. At their time, what they suggested, what they recommended was a 40-day period of isolation, complete isolation, so that you have no one but yourself to listen to, no outside influence at all. In doing that, you obtain the discernment to recognize who you truly are. I've done that. When I moved here, I had way longer than 40 days where I was isolated by choice. I mean, I'd go in and get groceries and stuff, but that was about it. And the only way to truly find yourself is to remove yourself. And that's something most people don't have the ability to do. One of the energetic procedures that I have done through my practice that I've created is to remove the imposter through directly working on the plane that exists on through the etheric plane. And this is something that I have available. And there are many other things that are available. Honestly, I have shaman that call me or message me on a regular basis that have challenges that they need help with. People that have traveled the world and worked with spirits and plant medicines and everything else for many lifetimes that come to me for help. And I've yet to come across a challenge that I can't overcome fairly efficiently. Um, Case in point, one of the fairly recent examples, I had a shaman friend of mine that reached out to me and needed help because one of their colleagues had a demonic pact that was drawn up by their partner to bind them to a demon, blood contract, a blood oath. And so I talked to him for about an hour, hour and a half on a conference call, and then went into the spiritual planes and the multiverse to navigate the situation and deal with it. And the primary force that I work with, if I worked with anything at all other than my higher self, it would be Abaddon. My understanding is from my own research that Abaddon is the closest that we understand and know of to the true God because he has full dominion over the heaven, the earth, and the underworld. The underworld is not exactly what you think. Agartha is basically the underworld. The inner earth is the underworld. And there are some ferocious and terrifying beasts in there. I know, I've been there, I've worked with them. But honestly, there's just as many evils on the physical plane that are human. But that's neither here nor there. Humanity has a far greater potential than most people realize or ever achieve. And that's just a fact because the conditioning and programming is so deeply ingrained into our civilization and so deeply buried in lies that the truth has been forgotten. But anyway, we do have a few people here. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to text in any messages you have or any questions you have. I'm just reforming it as I'm guided, so this isn't really scripted or anything, and I have no idea how much longer it will be. Thank you to those who did join me and are joining me. Um, yeah, there's far more knowledge that we have forgotten than we have been taught. We have we still have no understanding truly of how they built the pyramids. Well, we can go into that one if you want to. The pyramids were, well, first of all, they're far older than Egypt. That's water erosion on there. That is not wind erosion. On the pyramids, on the Sphinx, all of that. My understanding is they are the last vestiges and remnants of one of the previous civilizations. I believe, from my understanding, it is the fifth civilization of humanity, the one that existed right before us, which would be the tall whites are the ones that, from my understanding, built the pyramids. And this is a global pyramid. This is a global thing, not just the ones in Egypt, but the ones in Central and South America, the ones all over the world. And they were built not using slave labor and technology, but using cymatics, using everything that exists is created and composed of atoms that are moving at a very fast pace so that they appear solid. The mass of these objects and the density of these objects, even, is created by the energy that is produced from the atoms moving at the pace they are moving. Everything that exists is almost 100% empty space. It just appears solid because the atoms are moving so fast that it has a density. Through the use of sound frequencies in large numbers, they would have 12 people that would surround each stone. Each of those 12 would have 24 outside of it, and then a third ring of 48. And they would be humming or chanting or playing instruments or whatever. And my belief is that it was tuned to 110 hertz because that is the frequency that the inside of the king's chamber of Egypt resonates at if you strike it with a tuning fork. So if you are able to align yourself with those atoms and molecules and slow them down, it becomes not only lighter but more malleable, almost like turning stone into styrofoam. And as such, it can be shaped very easily. It can be formed and refined. It can be moved easily because it weighs a lot less. And that is, from my beliefs, how the pyramids were created. And again, they were created long before humanity existed. Long, long before humanity as we know it existed, rather. It was a version of humans, but it was a different version. It was a higher version. And there is no time reference to how long each of these civilizations existed before humanity. The first three were fairly short lived because they were failed attempts. Humanity was not functional. And the second two were longer lived, but we don't have a reference of how long because they became too functional. They became too powerful for civilization to be manipulated and controlled. Humanity, as we know it, is the perfect balance between being a intelligent slave, and most people are just that. They're intelligent slaves. They're good workers. They very willingly work hard and have a sense of pride and almost to the point where it's like most of humanity have built a prison for themselves through their wage slavery and through their servitude to the system, through their paying taxes, through everything like that that's accepted and acceptable and socially considered to be a norm. 10% or 20% tithe to your church, another 10 or 15% going to the state and federal government for your taxes and everything. And then you've got your taxes on your property. And even if you own it, you still pay taxes on it because you don't ever own anything. And well, that's just the facts. And they don't own anything either. They just stole it. But power is granted by command. And we have the ability on an individual level to command our universe, to take control of it. In essence, becoming our own God. But with that comes accountability. It requires one to fully hold themselves accountable for their actions and for the outcome of their actions. It requires one to move past fears of being condemned, fears of being misunderstood. You will be misunderstood. When anyone steps into their truth, whatever their truth is, it will be condemned. It will be judged. I mean, there's people on this platform that have thousands of followers. I have 150 because most people aren't ready for the truth that I speak. And that's fine. I'm not judging them. I'm not condemning them. I'm glad to have 150 people because it could be five. It was five for a long time. Your circle of influence in the spiritual community or in any business for that matter is not determined by the numbers. It's not a numbers game. It is determined by the quality of people and the compatibility of people within your circle. If you have five followers that are diehard loyal and listen to everything you say, that's more valuable than 5,000 people that don't care. Do not forget your value of your words and of your worth and base it on how many people are watching. Always remember, stay true to yourself, stay honest to yourself, even if others don't understand, even if you don't understand. We don't need to understand everything. We just need to accept it and recognize if it's consistent or not. If we can do something to produce consistent results from doing that, we don't need to know how we do it or why we do it or where we learned it or anything else. We just need to recognize that this is consistently working. This provides the outcome that I want. So this is what I'm doing. And I think that's a good note to leave on. Check out my website, which is now under development. If you're interested, please sign up for the with one of the contact forms on there so that we can schedule a energetic evaluation, which I'm offering for free at this time to just build customer base and establish people. And Ašipu Rothi, ASHIPUROTHI.com. Thank you and have a blessed day. Thank you so much for joining me.